Hello and welcome to another tutorial. So this time around we are going to be continuing to expand on the RTS series and again still focusing on that buildable side. So what I want to do this time around is make some improvements, some niceties there for our user interface, but in particular make it that it can easily support switching what builder it's connected to. So in Command and Conquer style games, you have just a single sort of build tab on the side and it's not really dependent upon what you've got selected. Whereas in things like Warcraft and Starcraft, you have different ones show up depending upon what you've actually clicked on. So we've got already that sort of CNC style working, and I want to make it that the same UI can actually work for that more Warcraft and Starcraft style, because kind of nice to be able to support both, and we're able to do that with not losing out anything there, which I think is a really ideal way. It means that you can sort of choose the setup that feels like the best fit for your particular game that you might be applying this to. So let's dive on in. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start off with a couple of little improvements. Now there's some bits I've already done for this in terms of the actual visual setup. So our buildable item picker, you'll see that one of the things I've done in a change that went in prior to the start of this video is I have added in a panel here to show the number of ones that are queued, because I think that's a nice thing to be able to indicate. So let's get the code support in for this, because while I set up the user interface side, I haven't set up the actual code side for it. So that's what I'm going to get going first. So what I actually will have here is we've got our item label. So because I've got it contained in a panel, I'm just actually going to have a game object here, and this is going to be the number queued panel. So we've got the number that'll be queued. I'm also going to, I want to be able to directly update the text, obviously. So we'll have our text mesh pro UGUI, and this will be our num queued label. So when we bind, when we link it to something, I'm actually going to, by default, turn off that actual panel. So not the label, we'll take the panel, and we're going to set active to false. So just turn that off, and that looks pretty good. The only other addition that I would need to make here is I'm going to give this an interface set num queued. So that will take in the number that are queued, and f, and I don't want it to be greater than 0. I really only want to show the number there if I have more than a single one queued. So if I have more than one, then what I'm going to do is I will set that panel to be active, but then the label, I want to set the text on that to that number that's queued. Otherwise, then all I will do is our num queued panel, and I want to turn that off. So nothing too major that I needed to do there with that, but that gives us the interface that we need now for showing the number that are queued. So, okay, I'll have to update my prefab here and make sure everything is linked up. So just link up the panel, and I link up the label. So that's good. We've got our prefab up to date. So, okay, let's see sort of what happens at the moment if I try and change what builder this is linked to. So at the moment we're linked to builder 1, we're running. If I go and change that to builder 2, we don't see anything different. If I go and start building something with this, then we can see it's ticking the build of that, so that looks okay. So we'll do that again. We're noticing we're not seeing proper progress stuff. If I change what builder I'm using, so things are not really quite working nicely if I go and actually change the builder. So that's useful to know. So we know we've got to fix up a few different things there with that behavior. So first thing I'm going to do is give us an easy way to sort of test this, to be able to trigger it actually doing that switch. So what I'm going to do, and this is something you'll see me tend to do a lot in ones, in particular in ones like this that are very UI based, as a way to make it easy to debug things. So I'm going to have a builder base here that is debug, new builder to set. And then I'm going to have another one here. This will be bool debug set new builder, and that will be defaulted to false. So what I want is to have this process of being able to, have it switch builders. So it might already have one, it might not have one. There's a few different cases I need to handle. At the moment, we're clearly set up for only handling it's got one and it's set at the very beginning and it stays set. So it doesn't remove listeners, anything like of that. So there's a lot of cleanup stuff we're going to need to do here. So one of the things that I'm going to do is, firstly, I'm going to rename this to default builder. And then I'm going to have a builder base linked builder, which again, I don't strictly need to be setting that to null. It's something where I tend to like to be quite explicit with some of these things. But okay, that's good. So that means in start, I want to have a function here that can go set builder. So autocomplete gets a little bit grumpy when it's something where I haven't actually created that function yet. So I'm going to create that function now. And that I will make public. And I'll change that to in builder, like that. So, okay. If we already have a linked builder, we need to do a couple of things. One of the big ones is all of these add listeners. I actually need to clear them out. So I want to remove all of those listeners because we shouldn't be getting events from any of the things that we were previously connected to. So just remove listener, and I'm just going to copy and paste that to make life a little bit easier. So we've removed all of the listeners, so that's good. Then the other thing I want to do is, so that category UI that I populate, so it was buildings and units and upgrades, I want to actually clean out all of that. So we clean out existing category UI, because I want this function to also handle if the in-builder that comes in is null, and then it should just clear everything. So what I do is, my usual approach is we go from child index and in this case it's our category UI root, and autocomplete is doing a pretty good job there with that. So I always go from the last one back. We get the child game object, get that, and then we just do a destroy of that game object. So we clean up that, we remove the listeners. So that looks good. Then what I would do is linked builder is our in builder, and if that's actually valid, then we need to do this. Then it actually makes sense for us to actually attach the listeners, and we can refresh the UI at that point in time. So that's good. Let's have a look at our refresh UI function though, see if there's any changes we need to make there. Well, one of the things here is we are regenerating the category UI, but we're only doing it if the child count is 0. Now, one of the things with cleaning up objects and that in Unity is I have found that there can be a little bit of a delay between doing that destroy and that child count updating. So relying on this when we're doing the destroy and potentially immediately after in the same frame doing creation and checking these sort of settings, this might actually not be 0. Which means it's going to give us unreliable results, and that's not good. So I'm going to change our refresh UI to have it that what we do is we actually pass in if we are wanting it to regenerate the categories. So f regenerate category UI, and we check that here. So f regenerate category UI, then we will actually do the respawning of it. Now, cleaning out the existing UI, that's absolutely something that we should be doing. So that can remain exactly as it was. The available builders check, all of that here looks good. So, okay, so far so good. A lot of that looks about right. There's a couple of other things that we do want to address here because we could switch to a builder that might not support, have any, as in might not actually have any buildables for that particular category. So I'm going to change this. And that's a scenario where with the CNC style, you have one builder, it's a kitchen sink one that supports everything. Whereas with this, we have multiple builders and some of them might only support particular types. So I'm going to actually check here if there's actually no buildable items for this type. So I can go linked builder, get buildable items for that category type. If it is null, then we just skip. We don't add in a button for it. So I think that's a really good thing to make sure we have. So we've got stuff there where you could go from a builder that builds one set of things to a builder that builds completely different set, which means our selected category could end up quite wrong. So one of the things that we should be doing then is actually resetting the selected category. So what I'm going to do first is store what the previous one was, just in case we can actually reset back to it. So previously selected category is our selected category. We're going to reset that to not set. Then what I will do here is if our selected category is not set at this point, then we set it to category type. But that would mean we wouldn't go back to the previous one if that actually was appropriate. So what I'm going to also do is then check, okay, well, if our previously selected category is actually this one, then I can override that. So this way we won't switch categories if this builder that we've selected still supports the same stuff. If the builder doesn't, then it will go and pick the first category that's applicable. So that's good. That will actually work quite nicely. The rest of the logic here is all good. So then the main thing we want to then do is make our debug code actually work. We've got a couple of areas where, okay, when we select a category, well, we definitely shouldn't be regenerating the category UI then. But when we change builder, we absolutely should. So that's all good. We can reset that. So I'm then going to set up my update function. And what I'm going to do here is F the debug set new builder. Firstly, I'm going to put that to false. And then I'm going to go set builder and debug new builder to set. So that allows us to actually kick off this setting logic. So that looks pretty good. That's at a point where we can actually now test this and see what happens. Okay, so let's test this out and see what kind of problems we potentially run into. So first thing I'm going to do is, at the moment, both of these builders can build anything. So I'm actually going to modify builder 2 so it's only able to build units. So we've got that modified. Then our build panel, I need to change our default builder. So that looks good. So let's run this. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test, okay, well, what if I set it to nothing? I should see everything here disappear. And we can see at the moment, it's saying that it can't remove these particular scripts and that. So we want to take a look. That's likely coming from here. So that is because easy to forget thing, that should be destroying the game object. So let's test this again. So we'll try that. So it cleared out everything, but it didn't clear out our UI there. So our items still remained. And if we go and take a look at our refresh UI function, it really, we'd expect, should have. But if we take a look at our setup for where we're calling it, we only refresh the UI if the actual builder is true. So we're actually going to refresh it no matter what, and it will regenerate the categories. Now that might mean that we find issues here, because we can only regenerate the category UI if we have a linked builder. So what I will actually do is I'm going to move the clearing out up to here, and then I'm going to check if our linked builder is null, then we return. So a little bit of a reorganization. We always do the clear out, but we won't do the regeneration unless that's necessary. So now we should see everything disappears, and it does, which is good. If I go and select a builder, everything comes back. If I switch to builder 2, then we can see it only shows the units. And then if I switch back to builder 1, we stay on the unit tab, but these other ones come back. So that's looking good. Let's test out a couple of things though to see what's happening now. We clearly don't have our queued UI linked up. That's okay, we'll be able to fix that. But let's see what happens. Oh, okay, so as soon as I go to another tab, things break. They'd likely also then break if I switch builder. And I could test that and queue up a bunch of things and then set the new builder. Now with that actually handles okay. But if I switch back to that builder, it does update the progress. So, okay, it's sort of working, but it breaks if we switch tabs. And that's because if we take a look at what we're doing and where that actually broke, it was breaking where we're working with stuff like this item picker UI map, because when it goes to update the progress of something, saying that it's been ticked, things like that, it actually is relying on that object being built, being in that UI map. But if we're on a different category, it won't be, it can't be. So we actually need to make a couple of updates here with this. And as part of this, I'm also going to update fix up this generation of the sort of queued information. So, okay, what I'm going to do is, because queued gets changed quite a lot. There's a lot of places actually where the queue gets affected when we cancel stuff, when something's finished building, when we actually start building something. There's a lot of different impacts there. So what I'm going to do is just have a refresh item UI queued information. Now the reason I'm doing this is because we really sort of have a lot of cases where it's going to be the exact same code. And so I want to avoid duplicating that code in a lot of places. So, okay, I need to retrieve that buildable item picker UI. So buildable item UI. So what I'm going to do for this is the kind of most efficient way for doing this, especially with it being something I'm doing quite a bit, is I will use try get value. Because try get value avoids any allocations if it fails, but it still actually gives us the information nice and easily. So that's good. Then what I can do is say, okay, well, buildable item UI, set the number queued, and we go for our linked builder. And I want to be able to ask it how many of an item is queued. And this is something we don't actually have as an interface yet. So that's something I want to be able to ask it. So this function needs to go over into our builder base. So I'm going to have a public int. So we provide it with the buildable object base. And I want to make sure I match sort of my naming here, buildable. So, okay, the num queued 0, and we'll return that. So we need to figure out how many of these things we have queued, which is actually reasonably straightforward for us to do. What I will do for that is, easiest way is, and I could use link for doing something like of this, but I think the way I will go for, just because link is great and I really, really love it, but for something like this that is getting called a lot, it's not necessarily going to be ideal in terms of performance characteristics. So I'm going to just do this the manual way. So we just have f build data, object being built is buildable. Then we increment the number queued. So that's good. So I can go back to our logic here, and that will work. So now I just need to put that refresh in all of the appropriate areas. And there are quite a few areas where I do want to actually make sure I do this. So few sort of areas. Well, obviously when I queue a build, and because I've designed it to have good sort of performance characteristics, it's something where it's okay if I'm adding it in a little bit too many places, or at least more places than I'd be sort of intending. So when we queue a build, definitely. When a new build has started, that's actually probably a good time to refresh it. When a build has been cancelled, I should refresh it as well. And also if a build is completed. So a few cases there where it's useful. Now, this ticked, I actually need to update that as well, because our UI might not be present in the thing. So it actually could suffer from the exact same issue. So we have a buildable item UI. Then we have our F and our item picker UI map. So we do the exact same thing that we did with the other one. We get our owning object being built. Similar names, always a hassle. And then we bring this up here. So we're just making this UI a little bit safer for if we have switched tabs, switched builders, things like that. Switching builders tends to not be an issue because we unlink all of these events, but switching tabs we already know is actually an issue. So, okay, that's good. We have told it to refresh in those particular cases. The other point in time when it's actually good for us to refresh this is when I actually go and spawn the UI here. So our item UI logic, I am going to set the number queued, and we just go for our linked builder, get number of item queued, and we have our available buildable. So that looks good. So that should mean that we don't get any errors when we're switching between our tabs now. And it should also mean that our UI for it being queued is working. So let's test this out. I'm going to queue up a bunch of things. You can see as soon as I've got more than one, it shows there in the queue. When it completes, it refreshes. I can switch tabs and it's fine. I could switch away from this builder and it's also fine. And if I switch back to it, then it's just actually working. So that's good. We've got our UI handling nicely for switching between the tabs if stuff's in progress, for switching between different types of builders is working properly, which is great. So the one thing that I do want to improve is if I go to cancel, you'll see how it resets. So it's canceling the one that's currently being built. I actually want to not undo that, but I want to actually give us an option. I want to give an option with the builder of does it cancel the one that's in progress, or does it cancel, if we've got multiple of it queued, it removes the one at the back of the queue. Because I think in most cases we want it to remove the one at the back of the queue. So I'm going to do that. We'll have public enum cancel behavior, and then whether it cancels the in progress or does it cancel the last queued. That. And I'm actually going to make the default that it cancels the last queued. So cancel behavior, cancel behavior, and we'll go for the last queued. So there's not too much we need to update to actually make this work. There's actually very little we need to update. So we have our request to cancel. That's the one that generally the UI goes through. So that's the one we're going to be updating. So what that currently does is if there is a build in progress of that particular type, then we just cancel that. So that's fine if what we're doing is canceling the in progress one. So we can check our cancel behavior. If that is equal to cancels in progress, then we just do that. That logic is completely fine. Otherwise, what I want to do is I want to search from the last object in our build queue to the first, and whatever one I find there that matches the type to cancel, that's the one that I want to actually remove. So we'll go from item index, and in this case, that's going to go from builds in progress, count -1, so we go backwards. So I'm going to check, okay, well, if builds in progress and the autocomplete is actually spot on there, so if this matches the one that we're trying to actually cancel, then I can just do that. So that will remove that particular one. So that should mean that if I go and might have a, yep, easy to have happen. So let's test this. So I'm going to queue up a bunch of units and I cancel one, and we can see it removes them from the back of the queue till we're down to the last one, and then we're done. So that's great. We've got UI that handles switching what builder it's connected to. We've got the information being preserved properly when we switch tabs. We've got support for different cancel modes happening there. So we've got a good basis now for our RTS building side of things. So what this means is next time we can start to look at things like having that building of stuff actually consume a resource or refund a resource. And again, there's different modes we can adopt there for that. So Command and Conquer tends to go for an approach where you can queue something if you don't have enough resources for it, and it just ticks away over time. Whereas if you take something like Warcraft, Starcraft, they often require you to actually have that amount of resources first, and it extracts the full amount immediately. So we'll look at doing that next time as an addition to this. But dive on in and experiment with the code, see if there are other things that you would like to add, other things that you might want to have there in terms of systems for it, and just see what you can create. Thanks folks, hope you found the video interesting and helpful. If you have, chuck in a like and subscribe, it really helps out, it's really appreciated. If you have got any questions or if there's additional features, things like that you would like to see in the RTS series, then chuck those in a comment below. If you're looking for the code for the project, I've put a link to that in the description. The code is freely available. You can use that in any of your own projects, whether those commercial or non-commercial ones. If you're looking for other ways to support the channel, then I do also have a Patreon, and there is a link to that in the description as well. But until next time, bye!